Well, we're quite behind our schedule. Well, we used quite a lot of time, and we're nearing the end of the session that has been scheduled. This is our fourth epilogue session that we've had. For 3 days, we had this big theme of Ocean as Uniters, pursuing global cooperation for the good of the planet. And under this big theme, we had very active discussions with the support of all the panelists and presenters. So the 3-day forum was a big success thanks to their efforts. And we have session chairs on the stage. So I believe that we can hear from them and give us a wrap-up of the sessions that they were chairing. So please share with us what you thought about the sessions. And regarding the next forum, the 17th World Ocean Forum, what would be the things that can be reflected so that we can be better? So why don't we start with Director Son Dong-ju of Pukyong University. He chaired the Humanities session, so I'd like to invite him to say a few words. Good afternoon. I'm with Pukyong National University. I'm the director for Humanities Korea Plus Research Group. And I chaired the Marine Humanities session and planned this session. At this World Ocean Forum, I believe that this is the most irrelevant topic, but at the same time, it can be the most interesting session, I believe. Well, we participated starting from the 12th World Ocean Forum starting from the 12th session, 12th forum. And since that time, we talked about marine humanities and we talked about the space of the oceans, and we wanted to get closer to people. So we had 5 years to look at marine humanities, and we put lots of thoughts into developing the themes. If you look at if you watch TV, then there are many ocean-related programs and shows. So there are many shows that are quite popular, dealing with seas and people moving back to the marine areas to live the rest of their lives. And also the government is supporting the fisheries industry, and they have this Marine New Deal 300. The key word for this New Deal is being more like the fisheries village. And in order to understand that, we have to understand what the life in these villages is like. So in the past, the fishing villages were about daily lives and jobs, but many of them are urbanized, and not all of them are engaged in fishing. And with this New Deal 300, with the government support financially, what would be the future directions going forward? And in order to build a village that is friendly for people to live in, and the reality of fishing villages, well, these are the 3 major themes that we looked at, and we had 4 discussants. We had very fun, interesting discussions. And all the presenters said that fishing villages are becoming extinct, and how can we revitalize these villages? If you think about the port of Changseungpo, well, they do not catch whales, but they do have many cultural products themed around whales. So we talked about how we can revitalize the villages using the concept of whales, and instead of abandoning it to become extinct, how can you make these villages more village-like, and we had many thought-provoking discussions and sessions around this theme. So regarding cultural products, I believe that we can incorporate these cultural projects in the themes of the next forum. Thank you.
예.
Thank you. Let me go to Mr. Kim Byung-ki, Director General of Busan Metropolitan City. Thank you very much. Well, this year's WOF was very successful, and I'm very glad to see the successful end. And I was a part of the planning part of this event, so it is very nice to see a nice end of this event. Mr. Kim Hyun-kyum and Mr. Secretary General and Mr. Jang Ha-yong, thank you for your hard work. And during the presentation by Dr. Chang, I wanted to say a few words. You mentioned the word cho, translating into super or hyper. In relation to ocean forums such as this, the digital transformation and carbon neutrality, I think, are the key words. And how to translate the word cho? Well, I think cho really means conversion. Convergence, because convergence is key to the fourth industrial revolution. And I just want to say two things. Just before the epilogue session, we heard about the SMR This is also a convergence of SMR, ships, and oceans. And at another forum, I was able to get a very fresh idea, as mentioned by Chairman Kim before. Aircraft carrier in the U.S. was brought to the Busan Sea. And this aircraft is powered by SMR. And if they can be used to pick up ocean litter, and it will be the most eco-friendly use. And back then, Hyundai Heavy Industries and all shipbuilding companies said that that's fully possible and it would be very interesting. And I found that that idea could actually bear fruit. So next year, maybe we can discuss more of these topics. And in 2018, I was the New Growth Director General. And at the Calvin Institute, I received a training. And I heard from a U.S. nuclear power expert speaker saying that Korea is going too much towards renewables like PV, but SMR does not use water and it can be installed anywhere. And there's hardly any radioactive waste. And because SMR cannot be used for weapon development, it is very safe. And he was concerned that nuclear power, as long as if no human resources are developed, the whole generation will be lost. So for high-level public officials, he wanted to really convey the message of the importance of developing human resources. So international and peaceful use of SMR is what I wanted to suggest. And yesterday, the president of OC Annex and CEO of Hyundai Heavy Industries, Mr. An, we had a luncheon. And in front of the Fiji Island in South Pacific, there's so much marine litter that actually formed a major patch of litters. And it's actually, you can see it on Google Maps. If HHI can build a large oil tanker with SMR, and that tanker can go to the ocean and pick up the litter and turn them immediately into hydrogen, we can put Korea to a higher national level. And because Mr. Lee Gi-taek, a Korean, is the Secretary General of IMO, maybe we can develop a legislation at the UN level to make our place in the world. And maybe this is another topic that we can discuss more in depth next year. And also at the first session, the mayor mentioned the 2030 Expo. we can engage in ODA projects to let our country know. And if HHI can develop such a ship and travel around the world to collect ocean litter, then we can also resolve some ODA issues. And yesterday, we also discussed the funding. For carbon neutrality, there's the ETS in place, and if ETS can be traded in the form of coins by the UN, and if that is linked to carbon neutrality, that could be also a great idea. I'm sorry to be going on too long. So just to sum up, in terms of convergence, the Busan Metropolitan City is pushing forward a project to collect data from satellite to grow new ocean industries. Small satellites are very prevalent nowadays. It only takes about $2 to $4 billion won to send one to space. So by 2025, we are planning to launch another satellite with NASA. We can track the ships and fisheries and fish stocks. This will be revolutionary in terms of fisheries. So in terms of data, we can create a new industries. So I want to understand the word tool as a convergence. And just lastly, I wanted to suggest that the Shanghai Container Index is very useful. And as Mr. Chair has mentioned earlier, Busan should take the lead under the topic of convergence. We can develop a ocean convergence index to assess ships, and this can one day be used globally. Connecting satellite with ocean, we can connect nuclear power with the ocean and also develop a index based on that convergence. Because Korea is now a powerful country on par with G7 nations, I think that this is the area that we can lead. Thank you very much for your suggestion. Next year, we will fully reflect your suggestions. Next, Professor Lee Yeon-seung.
저는 이번
Good afternoon. I chair the Shipbuilding Marine Transport session, Track 1, Decarbonization. In line with this big theme, Ocean is Humanities, we dedicated one track to decarbonization, and we looked at both shipbuilding and the marine transport. So decarbonization, 6 presentations for decarbonization, and 5 for DT, followed by general discussion. We had a day-long session for shipbuilding and marine transport. And also, during the session, Dr. Kim Boo-gi delivered presentation. And in the shipping industry, we had a presentation of the directions of the shipping industry, and we had a presentation by BPA. And when it comes to digital transformation, we had President VP, Executive VP of Hyundai Heavy Industries, and also presentation by Avicus. We had a presentation from Norway as well. In the afternoon, we also looked at the case of autonomous ships and commercialization status. And during these sessions, we talked about how international communities can work together. And the BPA delivered a presentation on increasing efficiency by the use of the digital twin platform, followed by the last presentation of Mr. Hyun-seung of Amazon Web Service, how the cloud technology can be utilized for the marine industry for DT. And in the epilogue session, we looked at the cases of SMRs. And regarding the possibility of vessels with SMRs, well, I thought that the presentation given during the epilogue session was very thought-provoking. regarding the issues of global warming and rising sea levels, all these are caused by the use of fossil fuels. So in tackling environmental challenges, I believe that the most proactive way is to find alternative fuels for vessels. And we believe that more quantified and proactive practical approaches are needed. So in the next World Ocean Forum, when it comes to the fuels for propulsion ships, we can have more active discussions around this theme. And as Director Kim stressed, the notion of convergence and how the fourth industrial revolution technologies can be applied for decarbonization, well, these are relevant with the drastic changes that are happening in the marine industry, and I believe that this should lead to the hyperconnectivity that he mentioned. And in order to tackle the big paradigm shift of today and to slash carbon emissions, we need more policy and industrial alliance. I believe we are on the same page as to what we have to do going forward. And during my session, Chairman Shin Dong-sik had a presentation, and he mentioned 3 things during his presentation. The first one was integration. Second, optimization. Third, orchestration. When we talk about technologies, integration and optimization are the things that we cover frequently. But when it comes to the third element, which is orchestration, this is not really something that we addressed too well. I believe that we can pursue bigger or better harmony in pursuing ocean as unitas. And I believe the key to opening this new era is in harmony. So in all different sessions, we had this common theme that crosses us and that unites us. And I think that we took a giant step moving into this direction. Thank you.
사실 이제 저희들이
Well, in fact, when we started, the most challenging area was how to connect shipbuilding, marine, and transport into a single track. So, in conclusion, as Dr. Lee said, she has a very tender charisma. And in the engineering sector, decarbonization and digital transformation can be quite a rigid topic, but she was able to flexibly unite the 3 areas into a single session. And I think it was a very big success. I'm not sure how you saw it, but Dr. Lee, thank you for all your effort. Next, we have Mr. Chang-mo, Head of Fisheries Policy Research Department at the KMI. Please take the floor. Hello. This is the first time that I prepared the WOF as a moderator and as a member of the planning committee. Rather than while preparing the event, as a moderator, I learned a lot. The global trend from the fisheries sector is really rapidly changing, and there are new requirements that are arising and with great uncertainties. So most of the presenters mentioned that in the 80% of economic areas, 5.8% are covered by a single block. And if we combine mega FTAs, then that drops to 5%. So market approach from a customs base to a qualitative base is undergoing a great change. And one of the key factors to the qualitative approach is environment, ecosystem, and labor. because this has become a very important issue in fisheries. I'm not sure if you can really sense this, but one example, if you catch one fish, not only the hygienic information, but the ship information, ocean information, the fishing gear information, whether IUU was involved, whether whales were captured in the process, and every type of information involved until the fish comes to the public landing site has to be revealed, and this is very challenging. So in terms of sustainability, this is where fisheries should be heading. And in the global trade, fisheries out of primary products, other than coffee, takes up the largest volume. So it is traded at a large scale, and it also involved a lot of different regulations. So what do we do going forward? That was discussed in our session. And basically, the competitive edge in our existing resources was the dominant factor in the past, but now technology is more important, and this is a determining factor in exports as well. For Samjin fish cake company, it's a 70-year company, and they will continue on 30 years to reach 100 years of history. They discuss what they needed to do. And for the company to last 100 years, the current form of Samjin company, in step with the changes in the global supply chain, was able to develop their distribution and processing technology to extend the shelf life of their products. So one of the weak points of the fisheries industry is the short shelf life. So production, processing, distribution are done separately, globally. So what we need to refer to as Swiss-made coffee or crude oil exports from Korea. We don't necessarily have to have the natural resources to make it happen. So the form of resources and exports that can be covered by technology, whatever we lack in the resources. So we can develop and extend the shelf life and export them. So FAO and SNU experts and many other experts agreed that this is the most fitting for the time, and we need policy support to develop this. And also government efforts for sustainability can be combined to allow companies to be more active and to make inroads into overseas market. And the next issue was the blue food concept. Their nutritious value, their sustainability values need to be connected to food tech. And we needed a much more specific topic, so that's what I'm thinking about for next year. Well, fisheries is a harvest-based industry, and connecting to distribution is a very important part. So in the process of distribution, how much of the freshness can be kept intact to be delivered to the consumer with technologies? Well, this is not a vague discussion about fisheries. As Dr. Ma has mentioned, the current industries are focusing on the shelf life, possibly indefinitely. It was very impressive. Thank you.
에 대한 이야기 때문에
Next, moving on to index. Now, Director Kim Min-soo, please. Just as Director Ma mentioned, well, at this World Ocean Forum, he said that he made a debut. And about myself, this is my first time to be on the planning committee and to chair the index session. So from planning to chairing, I participated in these efforts, and thank you for the opportunity. But when chairing the index session, there were two thoughts that I had in mind. First, why now and why Global Ocean Index? Even after the end of the COVID-19 crisis, we continue to see crisis in the Ukraine and also supply chain issues in the United States and hegemony issues around the world. So we live in the world of uncertainty, and we need a kind of a lighthouse for us going forward. And we wanted to be able to find the lighthouse in the ocean. And 70% of cities are close to oceans and in coastal areas. So that's where we started. And that's how we started to look at competitiveness of cities. And if we can have accurate judgment and evaluation of these cities, then in our journey for hyper-ocean era, I believe that we can have a great start. So that was the first thing that I need to tackle. Second, why do we have to come up with this index at the WOF? Even though I chaired the session this year, I believe that the thoughts were already there starting from 3 years ago. And there are two reasons behind this, I think. It's been 16 years since we've been holding this forum, and I believe that we need to make some actual contribution to the marine industry. And especially this year, we have the theme, Ocean as Humanities. So for that, we need some kind of platform. And second, as this is being hosted by the city of Busan, and as we're trying to attract the World Expo in Busan, well, it's really about the competitiveness of the city of Busan. We wanted to do the sense check of its strength and weakness. So that's why we wanted to look at index in this WOF. And a little bit more details about the session itself. We had 3 main presenters. As this was a first session ever, it was more like a brainstorming session. Chief Executive Officer Michael Waddell of the Zyan Group Limited. He talked about index design and implementation, and he stressed how clear the objectives should be secured and how we need to collaborate. The second presentation was about the Global Power City Index, and the presentation was delivered by the Dean of the Graduate School of Governance Studies. And the implications of this presentation include, well, if you think about pre- and post-pandemic era, and if you think about what can be affected by external factors, now we are better prepared. And when it comes to the Global Power City Index, well, among 48 cities, Busan was excluded. Unemployment rates and hosting international conferences, well, we did fairly well in terms of these areas, but when it comes to air quality, there were several other areas we didn't do quite well. And listening to the presentation, what I felt was, well, for these global power cities with strength are around coastal areas like New York, Shanghai, and Hong Kong. So even though Busan was excluded in this index, I believe that Busan has a huge potential to be high on this index. And once a city hosts big events like the Olympic Games, then the index goes up drastically. The very fact shows that we do want to attract the World Expo in Busan so that it can increase its status around the globe. And regarding the specific index, well, different indices had differing results based on their analysis. And also the city index, well, we have to look at the attractiveness of cities and also potential power of marine industries. And these have to be included in our thoughts. That's what we discussed. Like I said, this was more of a brainstorming session, as this was the first index session ever. And in the next forum, maybe we can have a more systemic approach regarding budgeting and in our future directions. Thank you.
예, 고맙습니다.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is a challenging topic, but thank you for the very easy explanation. And for the first time in the 16 years, we included the index session as part of the official sessions. I really look forward to what type of ocean indexes will be announced. I ask Mr. Kim to continue to work on developing the right set of index and continue your brainstorming efforts, and so that we can have the index published next year. So from KIOST, we have Mr. Choi, Director of Marine Security and Safety Research Center at KIOST. I haven't had the pleasure to meet Mr. Choi yet. Could you introduce yourself, and could you also give your thoughts on what happened at the KIOST special session? Thank you. I am Choi Bok-kyung, Principal Researcher at KIOST. I am mostly in charge of national defense matters. For the past year, I also served on the Presidential Advisory Committee. So the understanding of the ocean is in general lacking. In developing policies and making decisions, the high-level officials are not very interested in the ocean, I felt. And so making scientific investment in ocean is really falling behind what we need. And during the decarbonization session, there's the tidal power development station that was built, and in Incheon and other ports, we had a plan to build larger stations, but this didn't come through because of public resistance. But now I see that tidal power stations has a huge role to play for carbon neutrality. And for Busan to become an ocean capital city, many relevant institutions have relocated to Busan, so I think we need to work harder. The KIOST special session last year handled ocean industries, and this year we looked at the deep sea observation and research, with the aerospace agency leading the way. There's a lot of investment and effort put into space development. But deep sea is even more difficult and has even more extreme conditions than the space. From 300 meters below, the water temperature is 1 degree. And in East Sea, the water depth is about 2 kilometers. So that's 200 bars of pressure, and there's no light at all. And KIOST should also do better to do research in EC, the Korean Sea. We only focused on further out into international oceans. So our topic was to look at Korean seas. We invited 6 experts for presentations, stressing the importance of the EC, the deep sea area, and how to explore the deep sea. And also a presentation on deep sea space platform, which is being built for the first time in the world. We need an exploration infrastructure to support all these projects, which is very costly and is in dire need for national financial support. So from aerospace development, we should turn to deep sea development. Historically speaking, the country that ruled the ocean ruled the world, as can be seen in the UK and the US. And militarily speaking, countries with a strong navy has the strongest national defense power, so we need to work further on this front as well. So we heard the presentation about the ocean as uniters. Ocean should take the lead for coexistence and cooperation and convergence, and in particular, ocean science. So with that, I would like to sum up our session. And next year, I wanted to suggest how we should make the presentations. Rather than this being a paper type of presentations, why don't we limit the PPT to 5 slides with large letters? If you refer to platforms like TED, they only give like 5 to 15-minute presentations. Let's keep it interesting for the WOF to go up on YouTube after the event is over for the public access. I think it'll keep the public interesting and more familiar and friendlier to the public. Thank you.
예, 이걸 이제 우리
So regarding the point that you brought up, well, what's fun and what's interesting is the best. So what you can do is you can summarize what you discussed, and maybe you can create such a clip and upload it so that we can refer to it. Next, we have Professor Woo Soo-han from Chungang University. We were supposed to have officials from the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, but they attended the session, but they had to leave. And Professor Woo he actually worked for the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries before. He is one of the best secretaries. And now he turned into a professor. So what he looked at is global ocean governance, and this is one of the focuses that we had at the World Ocean Forum. We had many ideas and plans, and we also have to think about how these can be translated into governance. And we had many working level section heads from different industries, and many of our foreign guests were quite surprised by the fact that we had all these participants from these working level organizations and groups. So that's one of the feedback that I got. So regarding marine governance, about the theme of governance and about the detailed discussions, well, would you share them with us? Yes, well, my name, well, I feel quite pressured. I delivered a presentation which is about integrated administration at the MOF, which started 25 years ago, back in 1990s, and I looked at some of the achievements and also looked at measures to be improved. In France, they established the Ministry of Fisheries, and in coastal areas, they are integrating fisheries-related or marine-related functions together. In Korea, we have a 25-year experience in terms of integrated administration, and is there any room for improvement? That was the topic of my presentation. At the MOF, well, I was involved in this area for this long period of time, and with the integrated approach, we developed policies, and we created many issues based on the top policies that were prioritized. But what happened was there were many functional departments that came to the surface, and even though we wanted to have this integrated approach, working with many different departments, we had conflicts. Even though we did see some achievement when it comes to integrated administration, well, on the other hand, we had challenges and issues arising from this. So regarding that, we made a suggestion about the high-level body that can govern this and mediate these disputes. And there are many countries around the world that actually had such organizations for mediation. So we looked at the case of China, and regarding climate change, well, the current structure or the current organization is not sufficient enough to deal with the challenge, and we need global cooperation. That's what he said. And also there was this presentation on blue economy, which is widely received by the world. But when it comes to the definition of blue economy, countries have different interpretation. And sometimes we see that there can be siloed approaches by different players and nations. And there was a doctor from France who talked about biodiversity. From the ocean, we saw the creation of living species. And on the basis of biodiversity, we have lots of research activities, but this biodiversity, before we even study fully this topic, we are seeing the possibility of biodiversity becoming extinct. And also, a participant from the Fisheries Cooperative mentioned we utilize the ocean through navigation and fish catching. And when it comes to catching fish, we have the depletion of resources. And he mentioned how we desperately need wind power, offshore wind power, and how we can deal with the issue of depletion of resources. Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Defense, and Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries have to work together to deal with this issue. And also, there was another presenter who agreed with this idea. Governance is just means. It's just a means, not an objective. And in order to build effective governance, the government set up this notion, and France is also going through similar experiments. And when it comes to environmental regulations and industrial development, well, the same or single ministry is dealing with both of these topics. And we have to think about whether this is proper or not. So from the cases of Korea and France, we thought that we can look further into this issue to determine whether this is appropriate. And also from NOPOP, from China, marine governance of Korea. And regarding marine speculation, we set up goals, global goals, which was done very well. And in fighting these, well, if you think about microplastic, we don't have international conventions or local laws. We need international collaboration to come up with such conventions and local regulations, according to the presenter. Legislation, both at home and abroad, has to be strengthened, according to his presentation. So looking at the theme, well, I thought that we can have some general discussion around international administration and governance, but actually presenters developed this idea further to throw us more specific ideas and to think further about these matters. And we also agreed on the fact that we have to think about the direction of governance going forward. So maybe in the next forum, this is what can be incorporated instead of just approaching it from the perspective of integrated administration. Well, what would be the right governance that we need to tackle climate change? And I also got a question from the floor. Well, that was an undergraduate school student from the Maritime University, and the question was how he or she can participate. So what this person asked was, for younger generations, we call them MZ generation, in order for them to lead and play an active role, well, the suggestion was about having such a session where younger generations can play a bigger role, active role, regarding the marine industry and the future of the oceans. So the answer was that we will think about that, and this will be incorporated in the next year's forum.
저희가 그 가버넌스 개념
Yes, when adopting the concept of governance, the most important part would be understanding the vastness of the ocean, the indefinite nature. Does it really only involve the MOF? Rather, as you have just mentioned, I think the entire national sectors have to be integrated into the ocean particularly because Korea is a peninsula. So the purpose of including this as a topic of WLF is to have a full debate on this. So personally, I think that we did achieve the target because we wanted the MOF to have an interest, and perhaps the MOTI or Prime Minister's office or the meteorological administration could all work together on the global ocean governance. So next year, Professor Wu, perhaps you can invite experts from different relevant organizations for a debate. And during one of those sessions, perhaps we can also invite students who are interested. So we have Dr. Chang, but we also have from HHI, Mr. An joining us online. Could you introduce yourself? And also, we have discussed a number of different topics. As a planning committee member, you particularly dealt with the topic of shipbuilding, and you are a COO of the entire group. And you shared with us your views, and you helped us broaden our perspective. So I would like to invite Mr. An. I know that you're very busy, but could you share with us your concluding remarks? And Dr. Zhang, since you gave a presentation earlier, let me give the floor to Mr. An first. Mr. An, with that, we will end this session. Good afternoon. Unfortunately, I could not join you on the final day. Can you hear us? Hear me? Regrettably, I couldn't join you for the epilogue session for the debate, but I'm very busy, and I really wanted to spend the night in Busan, but I had to come back to office last night. So I'm still at my office. At the end of yesterday, during the shipbuilding marine transport, I joined the session throughout the day, and on my way back, I really thought that I learned a lot. The lack of linkage with the marine policy session, and during the session, a lot of what was discussed really felt irrelevant to the ocean as uniters and age of ocean as uniters. We need a lot of work to do. Shipbuilding or shipping were the key topics in ocean forums so far. And we had a number of presentations, and the chair also proposed many suggestions to include shipbuilding, marine and transport. And digital transformation involves shipbuilding, marine, transport, and logistics as well. So we had an additional session. Carbon neutrality and digital transformation are inseparable. They are both essential. Digital platforms, digital transformation was included as part of the session, mainly because climate change, decarbonization are stressed, but environmental regulation came first, and then decarbonization followed. But although climate change is only partly discussed, by 2050, we will have a stronger regulation than simply decarbonization. So to address all this, at the center of decarbonization are the fuels that we use every day. And in order to be able to use the fuels, we need digital transformation. And relevant technologies need to be developed in relation to the ocean. So I received exactly the same question as I received yesterday. 2 years ago in Korea, I was discussing at a shipping forum with other companies, why do we need to do digital transformation? It seems irrelevant to us. Why do we need to build a platform and cloud computing? How can we converge everything and activate this? But 2 years ago in Europe, digital transformation was proceeding very quickly with presentations being made. As Mr. Choi mentioned earlier, and as many discussants mentioned during the forum yesterday, organizations, governments, research institutes have a very vastly different way of thinking. Marine policy, well, everything that we mentioned today is being strongly driven forward by MOTI. But MOF is still very much behind. So, of course, this is an area that involves a lot of technology, and I'm sure that we will eventually see the movement that we need. But more work needs to be done. So going forward, these forums should be able to shift the way we think and we live. For decarbonization and to respond to climate change, we need to convert from diesel to green fuel, LNG, ammonia, methane, hydrogen, SMR. So from the corporate side, we are already approaching SMR. Hydrogen is near complete for ships and relevant technologies and digital transformation. Everything is complete, and this is actually being commercialized. And whatever you want, we can work with the relevant partners globally. But other organizations, I dare to say, are still at the initial stage. They are quite late in this race. And yesterday, I was really able to keenly feel during the Track 3 wrap-up, there were some negative views presented on decarbonization. And I felt that not everyone is on board when it comes to decarbonization. During my session, Professor Lee's session, Professor Kim's session, despite all the discussions made during those sessions, I felt that there are people who do not really agree. And so everyone preparing the WOF and everyone at the planning committee, we really need to open up on our thinking. And the two needs for shipping, marine transport, and logistics need to be moving in tandem. Decarbonization is already taking place, and green fuels are already being used. And now, the last resort is SMR, and we also have hydrogen. But as mentioned yesterday, up to LNG, the cost involved is not very high for the engineers and the producers. But for other fuels, production cost is very high. And there will be stringent regulations. Even if we work hard to develop fuels, we cannot test the methanols on shore, ship them, or ship methane-propelled ships, berth them, because regulation is not there. So unless everything turns into autonomous mode, technologies cannot be used. So this involves shipbuilding, marine transport, and logistics and digital transformation, and self-control. So ports and harbors need to undergo digital transformation, and they need to use those technologies. Marine transport, ports, and logistics are really quickly moving but there's no human resources. And so we have no option but to automate the system. So when digital transformation takes place, we discussed that human resources will be lost, but we will lose jobs, but that's not true. So President of KMOU, Mr. Do, really moved quickly with me to request the government to open up a new school on AI. So we need to work together. So what I want to suggest is that, of course, SMR for companies, FSRU is the latest technology. Our company, for wind power development, we use water electrolysis to produce electricity. The wastewater and plastics are degraded for recycling as fuels, and we produce green plastics as well. SMR, we are nearly complete in ship design for SMR propelled ships. Submarines and the like can be designed on our own in Korea, but for SMR, we need a national regulation policies that need to be set up. And once that happens, we can be ready to attach SMRs to ships. But in terms of economic viability, after LNG, other fuels to come are too costly for ships to actually operate on those fuels. And lastly, my final suggestion, well, I myself is really looking back on myself, but going forward, I hope that our sessions, everything that's presented, well, or rather than just discussing amongst ourselves, we need the consensus and agreement of the public and of the world. We need convergence across the world, but convergence can only happen when when there is a consensus. So we need to really think back on whether we are reaching a consensus based on our sessions. And based on that, we need to shift the focus of the forums to come. I'm not sure what percentage of the audience actually understands what's being discussed. Because if even amongst ourselves we do not have a full understanding, then what about the audience? So we need to think about that and to make sure that the World Ocean Forum becomes a truly global festival rather than just a celebration amongst ourselves. And so all the tracks in shipbuilding, marine transport, logistics, and even the ocean session should be connected into one. And they are already connected, but we are dealing with them as if they are not. So going around the world, I participated in many of these forums, and on Saturday, every other Saturday with Professor Kim, about 800 people, the best of our experts have a conference. And we need to expand such occasions, as I discussed with Chairman Kim. So many of you have expressed concern on the technological advancement, but actually technology is fully advanced, so no worries. But we do need to better communicate with the public. And next time, I hope to discuss more global topics so that everyone can be on board and to show the world that we are doing well, and so that we can build a consensus on these topics in order to work together on business as well. So this should be in mind as we plan for the future forums. Thank you very much.
예, 안사님 고맙습니다. 아주
Thank you. Thank you very much. So you drew a very clear conclusion compared to last year. I hope that this year's session was a big improvement. And from this epilogue session, just like we did before, we looked at in what areas we can improve, and also we talked about what can be incorporated in future sessions. So by participating in the forum itself, we want to create a forum where participation itself leads to enhanced knowledge and enhanced interest. So with that, I would like to close my session. Thank you very much for your participation, and why don't we stand up and say goodbye to them. Thank you very much for the great insights. I would like to thank Chairman Kim Hyun-kyum for chairing the session, and I'd like to thank all the panelists for your suggestions and insights. With this, I'd like to officially close the World Ocean Forum 2022. Thank you for sitting through the discussions, and thank you for these suggestions. Then I'd like to announce the official closing of the World Ocean Forum 2022, and I will meet you back at the 17th World Ocean Forum in 2023. Thank you.